The room I'm standing in right now has 2 beds, a window that faces the parking lot, and a Bible in the nightstand that someone has bookmarked to Judges 19. If you don't know that passage, it's the one about the traveler who stops overnight in a town full of strangers. It does not end well for the traveler. I found that bookmark, my 3rd week, on the job. I thought it was a coincidence. By my 6th week, I'd found the same bookmark, same passage, same book of the Bible in 11 different rooms. Someone had been through every room in this building and marked that page. I want to talk about who, and I want to talk about why, and I want to talk about what the Devil's Hotel actually is. But the reason I'm recording this right now, tonight, from a motel room 400 miles away, the reason I'm saying this out loud instead of just driving, is that I checked the job listings 2 hours ago and the position is posted again. Same listing, same wording, same salary, and it already has applicants. The building's real name is the Coronado Motor Lodge. It's on State Route 162, about 11 miles east of a town called Purgatory, Colorado. That's a real town. Census-designated place in La Plata County. Population hovers around a few hundred depending on who's counting and when. It's near the ski resort, Purgatory at Durango, and during season it gets a reliable flow of tourist traffic heading up the mountain. The Coronado sits just far enough off the resort corridor that you'd only find it if you were looking for budget lodging, or if your GPS routed you wrong. 46 rooms, single story on 3 sides, 2 stories on the main building. Built in 1971, last renovated maybe 2005. It has a pool they keep drained, a breakfast room with a waffle iron that works about half the time, and a hand-painted wooden sign near the highway turnoff that someone decades ago decorated with little red devil horns on the letter O. That sign is where the name comes from, the Devil's Hotel. Locals use it casually the way you'd say the old Miller Place or the gas station by the bridge. No menace to it, just a name, a landmark. I want to be clear about that. When I took the job, I didn't think I was walking into a horror story. I thought I was walking into a paycheck. My name's Owen. Last spring, I was 31, recently separated, and living in a week-to-week efficiency in Grand Junction. I'd been doing maintenance and light handyman work since I left the Army in 2020. Nothing complicated. Drywall, basic plumbing, appliance repair. I had a truck, a reasonable set of tools, and a Colorado contractor's license that I kept current because it made me look more legitimate on job boards than I actually was. The listing was on Indeed. Maintenance manager, mountain lodge, housing included. The salary was modest, but the housing included part is what stopped my scroll. That phrase, if you've ever been in a situation where your rent absorbs 70% of your income, that phrase has gravitational pull. I applied at 11 p.m. on a Tuesday. I had a phone interview by Thursday. The man who called me identified himself as Mr. Carrow, general manager. He had a voice like someone who'd quit smoking recently enough to still be annoyed about it. He asked me 3 questions. Did I have my own tools? Could I start within 2 weeks? And was I comfortable being the only maintenance person on a small property? I said yes to all 3. He said, "Good. We've had trouble keeping this position filled. People like the idea of living on-site until they realize what on-site means." I asked what he meant. It means you're 11 miles from town, and the nearest bar closes at 9. People get bored. They leave. That sounded fine to me. I wasn't in a going-out phase. He said the housing was a converted room on the ground floor of the East Wing, room 18. It had a kitchenette they'd added and a separate entrance so I wouldn't have to walk through the lobby. He said I'd have 1 day off a week, flexible, and that during ski season I'd be expected to keep the lot plowed and the walkways salted, in addition to regular repair work. I drove down the following Monday. The first thing I noticed about the Coronado was that it was cleaner than I expected. The photos online made it look like every other fading highway motel in the rural West, and structurally that's what it was, but someone was keeping up with it. The parking lot was swept, the landscaping was trimmed. The exterior paint was one of those desert tans that hides age well, and it had been touched up recently enough that you could still smell it faintly on the south-facing wall. Mr. Carroll met me in the lobby. He was maybe 60, thin, tanned in that way that doesn't come from leisure. Wearing a button-down shirt tucked into khakis, he shook my hand and held it exactly long enough to communicate that he was sizing me up and wanted me to know it. "Owen, good. Let me show you the property." He walked me through the whole building, every wing. The East Wing, where I'd be living, had rooms 1 through 18 and faced the highway. The North Wing, rooms 19 through 32, faced the mountain. The West Wing, 33 through 46, faced the back of the property and a scrub field that ran into BLM land. The main building housed the lobby, the breakfast room, the office, 2 storage closets, and a laundry room with 4 commercial washers and 3 dryers, one of which he said had been temperamental since 2019. That's your first job, he said. Get dryer 3 running, or tell me it's dead, so I can order a replacement. I like that. Clear task. Immediate. No ambiguity. He introduced me to the staff. There were 5. Mrs. Carrow, his wife Nadine, handled front desk from 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. A woman named Bethany handled 3 to 11. A housekeeper named Rosa came in 6 days a week with her daughter Maria, who was maybe 19 and didn't speak much. And there was a groundskeeper named Dale who handled the exterior and the pool, and who Carroll described as part-time but always around. Dale was sitting on a lawn chair by the drained pool when we walked past. He was maybe 70. He nodded at me and didn't get up. He's been here longer than me, Carroll said, and something about the way he said it made me think that wasn't a compliment. Room 18 was fine. Small, but I lived in smaller. The kitchenette was a 2-burner stove, a mini fridge, and a microwave mounted under a cabinet. The bathroom worked. The bed was a queen with a mattress that had some life left in it. The window looked out on the east side parking spaces, and beyond them the highway, and beyond that, a ridge of low scrub hills that turned gold in the afternoon light. I unpacked my bag, set up my tools in the storage closet Carroll had assigned me, and spent the rest of that first day on dryer 3. It was a belt issue. Took me 40 minutes. I had it running by dinner. When I told Carroll, he looked at me like I'd said something in a language he didn't expect me to speak. The last guy said it needed a new motor. It didn't. He was quiet for a second. Then he said, "Good. That's good." That night I sat in room 18 with the window cracked and listened to trucks pass on 162 and thought, for the first time in maybe 6 months, that I was going to be okay. The first week was simple work. A leaking faucet in room 24. A toilet that wouldn't stop running in 37. A section of baseboard in the breakfast room that had separated from the wall. The ice machine in the north wing was cycling but not producing, which turned out to be a frozen fill tube I cleared with a hairdryer. I ate lunch in the breakfast room most days. Nadine would be working the desk, and she talked to me while I ate. She was in her late 50s, calm, and genuinely kind in a way that didn't feel performed. She'd been married to Carrow for 32 years. They'd managed the Coronado for the last 11. Before that, they'd run a similar place outside of Cortez. He likes you, she said, on maybe Wednesday. He doesn't like most people. What happened to the last maintenance guy? She poured herself a coffee. He left. Carrow said people get bored. Some do. Was that what happened? She set the coffee down. He was here about 4 months. He was fine. Then he started asking questions about things that weren't his job, and then he wasn't fine, and then he was gone. What kind of questions? The kind you're asking right now? She smiled when she said it. Warm, deflective. I let it go. People who run motels in small towns are entitled to their privacy. I wasn't there to investigate anyone's business. I was there to fix things that broke. The second week, I found the first list. I was repairing a drawer track in room 11. The nightstand had a stuck drawer, and a guest had yanked the handle half off trying to force it. I pulled the whole nightstand away from the wall to get at the back panel, and a folded piece of paper fell out from behind it. Notebook paper. College ruled. Written in pen. It said, "Don't take shifts at the front desk. Even if they ask. Even if Bethany calls in sick. Don't go into the West Wing after 10 p.m. If a guest in the North Wing asks you to help them carry something to their car, say no. Don't talk to Dale about the rooms. He'll bring it up. Change the subject. If Carrow asks you to drive a guest to the bus station in Durango, volunteer someone else, or call them a cab. Don't be alone in a car with a guest. Room 6 has a connecting door to room 7. It's supposed to be locked from both sides. Check it every week. If it's unlocked, lock it, and don't mention it to anyone. If you hear noise from a room that's supposed to be vacant, log it in the maintenance book and leave. Don't check it yourself. The rules are not a joke." The last 3 people who had this job didn't follow them. Ask Nadine what happened. She won't tell you, but watch her face. I read it twice. Then I folded it back up and put it in my pocket. Here's what I want to be honest about. I read stories online, the creepypasta stuff, the rules-based horror, all of that. I recognized the format immediately. Someone writes a list of creepy rules, hides it somewhere atmospheric, waits for the next person to find it. It's a prank. Specifically, it's a prank designed to unsettle whoever gets your job after you leave, and that's exactly what I thought it was. I thought some bored predecessor with a flair for the dramatic had watched too many YouTube videos and left this for me to find, probably laughing about it on his drive out of town. I almost threw it away. I didn't, but only because I'm the kind of person who keeps things. I folded it into my wallet behind my insurance card and I forgot about it. That was my mistake. Not finding the list, not keeping the list, not even ignoring the list. My mistake was that I assigned it a category, prank, and stopped thinking about it, because every single thing on that list turned out to be practical advice, and not one word of it was supernatural. Third week. Carrow asked me to cover the front desk for 2 hours on a Saturday afternoon. Bethany had a dentist appointment. Nadine had already left for the day. I said sure, it was fine. Check-in was straightforward. The system was an old desktop running some legacy reservation software that looked like it hadn't been updated since 2012. 3 guests checked in. All ski traffic. I gave them keys, pointed them toward their rooms, told them the breakfast room opened at 6:30. The 4th person who came in wasn't checking in. He was maybe 45. Neat. Short hair, clean jacket, boots that were functional but not new. He walked in, looked at me, and said, "You're new. I'm maintenance. Just covering the desk. Where's Bethany? Appointment." He stood there for a second, just looking at the lobby, then at me. Then he said, "Has Carrow asked you to do any driving yet?" The question was so specific that it stopped me. What? Driving. Guests to the bus station. Airport runs. Anything like that. No. When he does, say no. He turned and walked back out. I heard a truck start in the lot and pull away. I stood behind the desk for a while after that. The lobby was empty. The light was getting flat. I could hear Rosa's vacuum running somewhere in the north wing. Then I remembered Rule 5. If Carroll asked you to drive a guest to the bus station in Durango, volunteer someone else or call them a cab. Don't be alone in a car with a guest. I took the list out of my wallet and read it again. It didn't feel like a prank anymore. I want to explain something about the geography because it matters. The Coronado sits in a gap. Route 162 runs east-west through a valley corridor between Durango and Bayfield. Purgatory, the ski area and the little community around it, is north on Route 550, up toward the pass. The hotel is at the intersection of being close enough to the resort to catch overflow traffic and far enough from town to be functionally isolated after dark. 11 miles doesn't sound like much. In daylight, with a car, it's nothing. But at night, on a 2-lane highway with no streetlights and cell service that cuts out in the canyon sections, 11 miles is a meaningful distance, especially if you're on foot, especially if something is wrong. The nearest neighbor to the Coronado is a ranch about 1.5 miles west. After that, BLM land. East toward Durango, there are a few scattered properties, but nothing with consistent lights you could see from the highway. Carrow had chosen this place. 11 years ago, he and Nadine looked at available properties and chose this one. I started thinking about why someone would choose the most isolated commercial property in the county and stay for over a decade. At the time, I told myself the answer was obvious. It was cheap, and the ski traffic was reliable. I don't tell myself that anymore. Week 4. I was replacing a section of gutter on the west wing. Up on a ladder, working the fascia, when Dale walked up below me. "You settling in?" "Yeah." "It's a good spot. You been in the rooms much?" I looked down at him. Rule 4. Don't talk to Dale about the rooms. "Just for repairs," I said. "You notice anything about them?" "Like what?" He squinted up at me. He had a face like a topographic map, deep lines, sun damaged, expressive in a way that was hard to read because everything on it had been carved by weather instead of emotion. "The West Wing rooms are different," he said. "Different how?" "Quieter." I didn't say anything. "You go in 33 through 40, you'll notice the walls are thicker. Carrow had them redone maybe 8 years ago. Said it was for insulation, but it's only that wing. Rest of the building's got standard motel framing. You can hear your neighbor sneeze. West Wing, you can't hear anything. So we upgraded the insulation. That's good for guests." Dale looked at me for a long time. "Sure," he said. "Good for guests." He walked back toward the pool. I watched him go. When he was gone, I came down the ladder and walked into the West Wing. I went into room 36, which was vacant and unlocked because I'd been in there that morning fixing a curtain rod. I stood in the middle of the room and clapped my hands once, hard. The sound died immediately. Not the way sound dies in a normal room, where it fades, reflects, decays. It just stopped, like the walls caught it. I went next door to room 37 and did the same thing, same result. I went back to the East Wing, room 12, clapped. Normal reverb, normal sound. I stood in the hallway and looked down toward the west wing. The corridor was identical. Same carpet, same lighting, same doors. But Dale was right. Those rooms were different. Not cosmetically, acoustically. Someone had spent real money soundproofing 8 specific rooms in a budget highway motel, and the only person who'd mentioned it was the groundskeeper who everyone seemed to want me to ignore. That Friday, Carrow called me into the office. "Owen, I need a favor. We've got a guest checking out tomorrow who needs a ride to the Greyhound station in Durango. Her car broke down, and the tow won't get here until Monday." I felt something cold settle into my stomach. "Can we call her a cab? Nearest reliable car service is 40 minutes out, and she'd have to pay $70. It's a 15-minute drive. I'd do it myself, but Nadine and I have a thing in Cortez in the morning." I looked at him. He was leaning against the desk. Casual, reasonable. "Which room is she in?" 38. "West wing." "I'll call her a cab," I said. "I'll cover the fare out of my own pocket if the lodge won't." Something shifted in his face. Not anger. Something more controlled than anger. Recalibration. "That's generous," he said, "but unnecessary. I'll have Bethany handle it." "Okay." He looked at me for another second. Then he nodded, and I left. I went back to my room and sat on the bed. My hands were shaking, and I didn't fully understand why. Nothing had happened. A manager had asked me to give a guest a ride, and I'd said no. That was all. But the way he'd said 38, like the number, was the answer to a question I hadn't asked. I started paying attention after that. Not investigating. I want to be careful about that word. I wasn't sneaking around or breaking into offices or rifling through files. I was doing my job, walking through the building every day, fixing what needed fixing, and I started noticing things that had been there the whole time. The West Wing had the lowest occupancy of any section. I could see this just from the key rack. Nadine used a physical pegboard behind the desk in addition to the digital system, and West Wing keys hung undisturbed for days at a time. But when those rooms were occupied, the guests were different. Ski traffic guests were predictable. Families, couples, small groups. They checked in loud, asked about restaurants, left gear in the hallways, checked out Sunday. West Wing guests checked in alone, usually late. Bethany handled most of them because they arrived on her shift, between 3 and 11. They didn't ask about restaurants. They didn't use the breakfast room. And they checked out early, often before Nadine arrived. I'd see their rooms flagged for cleaning on Rosa's sheet, but I never saw the guests themselves leave. I counted. Over 3 weeks, 7 guests stayed in the West Wing. I saw 2 of them. Both were alone. Both were women. Both were women. Both looked like they'd been traveling for a while. Not disheveled, but compressed. The look people get on long bus rides. Tired in a way that isn't just physical. I never saw the other 5. I want to stop here and say something about how your mind works when you're living in a place like this. You're not a detective. You're a handyman. You fix dryer belts and curtain rods and running toilets. The building is your workspace and your home simultaneously, and that dual identity creates a kind of psychological merging where the line between my job and my life dissolves entirely. You eat where you work. You sleep where you work. The people you see every day are both your coworkers and the only human beings in your social universe. So when you start noticing things that don't add up, you don't react the way you would if you were just passing through. You don't get to check out and go home and think about it from a distance. The discomfort lives with you. It sits in the room while you eat dinner. It's there when you wake up at 2 in the morning and hear a car pulling into the lot, and you look out your window and see it park in front of the West Wing and see someone walk a guest to a room and the headlights go off and everything goes quiet. And in the morning you check the key rack and room 34 is occupied, and you never heard a sound from it all night. Because you can't. Because the walls are built so you can't. 6 weeks in, I did something the list told me not to do. I went into the West Wing after 10 p.m., not to investigate. I had a legitimate reason. A pipe joint in the bathroom of room 40 had been seeping. Slow drip, not urgent, but the kind of thing that rots subfloor if you ignore it. I'd flagged it on my maintenance log that morning. I'd meant to fix it during the day, but got pulled onto a heating issue in the north wing that took 4 hours. At 10:15, I was restless and thinking about the pipe. I told myself I'd go tighten the joint, take 5 minutes, come back. I grabbed my wrench, walked down the east wing corridor, through the lobby, and into the west wing hallway. The hallway was dark. Not unlit. The overhead fixtures were on, but the light quality was different. The west wing used the same fluorescent tubes as the rest of the building, but they seemed dimmer. I'd check the ballast later, I thought. I got to room 40. Used my master key, Opened the door. The room was supposed to be vacant. It was on my log as unoccupied. Rosa hadn't flagged it for cleaning because no one had been in it. There was a suitcase on the bed. It was a small rolling case. Black. The kind you carry onto a plane. It was closed but not zipped. The zipper was about 3/4 of the way around, and a piece of fabric was caught in it. Next to the suitcase, on the bedspread, was a cell phone. The screen was dark. The bathroom light was on. I could see it from the doorway. A strip of yellow under the bathroom door. I said, "Hello? Maintenance?" Nothing. I walked to the bathroom and opened the door. Empty. The light was on. The faucet was dripping. That was my pipe issue. But the room was empty. No toiletries on the counter. No towel disturbed. No sign anyone had used the bathroom. I went back to the suitcase. I did not open it. I want to be clear about that. I looked at the phone. It was an older Samsung, one of the budget models. Cracked screen protector. A small sticker on the case. A cartoon flower with a smiley face. The kind of sticker a teenager puts on things. I left the room. Locked it. Went back to my room. In the morning, I checked the key rack. Room 40's key was on the peg. I walked to 40 and opened it. The suitcase was gone. The phone was gone. The bed was made. I checked Rosa's cleaning log. Room 40 was not on it. It hadn't been cleaned because, according to every system in the building, no one had been in it. I called the county sheriff's non-emergency line that afternoon from my truck in the parking lot with the windows up. I didn't know what to report. I need you to understand how that feels. You know something is wrong, but you don't have a crime. What do I say? I found a suitcase in a room that's supposed to be empty, and in the morning it was gone. That's not a crime. That's a hotel. Things get left. Things get moved. Rooms get booked last minute. There are explanations for everything in isolation. It's only when you line them all up that the shape comes through. The dispatcher asked if I wanted to report a specific incident. I said, "I think something might be happening at the property where I work. I'm not sure what." She asked for my location. I gave it. "The Coronado," she said. Then she paused. "Are you a guest?" "No, I work here." "Hold on." She transferred me. A deputy picked up. He identified himself and asked me the same question. What did I want to report? I told him about the suitcase, about the soundproofing, about the West Wing occupancy patterns, about the guest I'd been asked to drive to the bus station. I told him about the list of rules and about the man who walked into the lobby and warned me not to do any driving. He listened. He didn't interrupt. When I finished, he said, "How long have you been working out there?" "6 weeks." "And you like the job?" The question was wrong, not inappropriate, wrong. Like asking someone who's reporting a gas leak if they like their apartment. I'm not calling about the job, I'm calling about the things I described. I understand. I'm going to note this in our system. If you see something specific, a person in distress, evidence of a crime in progress, call 911. Otherwise, we'll keep this on file. That's it? Mr. Neely. Mr. Neely. The Coronado has been in operation for over 50 years. The Carrows have managed it for over a decade. We're familiar with the property. If you have a specific criminal complaint, we'll investigate. But what you've described is a hotel where some rooms are quieter than others, and a suitcase that may or may not have been in a room. He wasn't hostile. He wasn't dismissive. He was doing exactly what a competent deputy does when someone calls with a feeling instead of a fact. I thanked him and hung up. The next day I did something I'd been resisting. I drove to Durango and went to the public library. I didn't know what I was looking for. I searched the Durango Herald's digital archive for Coronado Motor Lodge. Got a few results. A listing in a tourism roundup from 2014. A brief mention in a story about rural hospitality businesses struggling during the pandemic. Nothing notable. I searched for missing persons, La Plata County. Got results, but nothing I could connect. People go missing in rural Colorado. Hikers, transients, runaways. The numbers aren't unusual for the region. Then I searched for Coronado and Carrow together. One result. A letter to the editor from 2017. A woman named Sandra Devereaux writing from Flagstaff, Arizona. The letter was short. She said her sister Jolene Devereaux had been traveling through Colorado in September 2016 and the last known location her family had been able to establish was the Coronado Motor Lodge. She said her sister had called her from the hotel, said she was staying one night and was never heard from again. She said she'd contacted the La Plata County Sheriff's Office and been told there was no record of her sister checking in. She said the hotel's management said no one by that name had stayed there. The letter asked anyone with information to contact her at a phone number. I sat in the library and read it 3 times. Then I copied down the phone number. I called Sandra Devereaux from my truck outside the library. She answered on the second ring. When I told her I worked at the Coronado, the line went quiet for so long, I thought she'd hung up. "I'm still here," she said. "I'm trying to decide if you're real." "I'm real. The last person who called me about this was a private investigator I hired in 2017. He went up there, talked to the Carrows, talked to the sheriff, and came back and told me there was nothing to find. Charged me $3,000. What do you think happened to your sister? She stopped at that hotel, and she never left. That's what I think. That's what I've thought for 9 years. Did the sheriff investigate? He said he did. They checked the registration records. Jolene's name wasn't in them. They checked the room she told me she was in. Room 36, and it was clean. No belongings. No evidence. They treated it like a voluntary disappearance. Adults are allowed to vanish. Room 36, West Wing. Sandra, I need to ask you something, and I need you to think carefully about it. When your sister called you from the hotel, did she say anything about the people there? The staff? She said the man who checked her in was nice. She said he offered to drive her to the bus station in the morning because her car had been towed for an expired registration. Everything in my body went still. She said yes? She said it was nice of him. She didn't have money for a cab. Sandra, did anyone ever find her car? The impound lot in Durango had it. She never picked it up. The county eventually auctioned it. So she was at the hotel. Her car was confirmed in the area. She told you someone was going to drive her in the morning, and then she was gone. And then she was gone. And her name wasn't in the book. And the room was clean, and the sheriff said there was nothing to investigate. I sat in that library parking lot for an hour after I hung up. I wasn't processing what I'd learned. I was processing how simple it was. Look, I've been around systems. The army is a system. Contracting is a system. You learn to see how things are organized and what the organization is designed to produce. And what I was looking at was not complicated. It was not supernatural. It was not even particularly clever. It was a business that operated 2 functions simultaneously. Function 1, a legitimate highway motel that served ski traffic, road trippers, and past due travelers. Clean rooms, waffle irons, a functioning reservation system. This was the visible operation. This was what the county knew. This was what the tax records showed and the health inspector visited. Function 2, the West Wing. 8 soundproofed rooms that accepted guests whose names didn't go in the book, whose arrivals happened on the late shift, who were alone, who were traveling without anyone expecting them at a specific time, and who were offered transportation they didn't have to arrange themselves. Transportation in a private vehicle, driven by an employee, on an 11-mile stretch of highway with no witnesses, no cameras, and no cell service in the canyon sections. The offer was always the same. Let us drive you. And it was always positioned as kindness. I thought about the list, about the person who'd written it. They'd figured this out too. But they hadn't gone to the police or the newspaper or anyone who could do something about it. They'd written 8 rules for surviving the job and hidden them behind a nightstand. Because they understood something I was only beginning to grasp. The system wasn't hidden. It was visible. The sheriff knew the property. The town knew the property. The town knew the property. The name itself, the Devil's Hotel, wasn't a joke. It was a warning that had been converted into a landmark, sanded down by repetition until it was just a quaint local thing. And anyone who tried to make it serious again would sound exactly like I sounded on the phone with that deputy. Someone with a feeling instead of a fact. I went back to the Coronado that evening. I want to explain why, because I know how it sounds. I went back because my tools were there, my clothes were there, my truck was in the lot. My room key was in my pocket. I had a job and a bed and a daily schedule that involved fixing things with my hands and the inertia of all that was stronger than the fear. And because I didn't have proof, I had a pattern, a letter to the editor, a phone call with a grieving sister, a suitcase that wasn't there in the morning. I had the kind of evidence that sounds devastating when you lay it out in sequence and sounds like nothing when any individual piece is examined alone. This is how it works, not through secrecy, through fragmentation. Every piece of evidence is deniable in isolation. The soundproofing is insulation. The missing names are booking errors. The guest who disappeared left voluntarily. The offer to drive someone is hospitality. Each explanation is reasonable. Each explanation is a lie. But you can never hold them all at the same time in front of someone with the authority to act, Because the moment you start talking, you become a conspiracy theorist. And the moment you become a conspiracy theorist, you've lost. I walked into the lobby. Nadine was at the desk. She looked up and smiled. Long day? Went into town for some parts. Dinner's in the fridge if you want it. I made too much soup. This is the other thing. Nadine was kind. Genuinely, consistently kind. She left me food. She asked about my day. She noticed when I was tired and told me to rest. And I could not reconcile that kindness with what I believed was happening in the West Wing. There are only so many options. Either she didn't know, or she knew and had made whatever internal arrangement allowed her to keep smiling. Or the kindness itself was functional, part of the system, designed to make me comfortable, to make the building feel like a home, so that I'd stay and eventually become whatever the last maintenance guy became before he left. I took the soup. It was good. I started documenting. Not dramatically, not with hidden cameras or secret recordings. I bought a pocket notebook from the gas station in Durango, and I started writing down what I observed, dated, and timed. West Wing check-ins, dates, times, whether I saw the guest or only saw the room flagged, how long they stayed, when they left, or when the room was suddenly available again without a checkout logged. I counted. Over the next 4 weeks, 12 guests stayed in the West Wing. I physically saw 4 of them, all women, all alone, all with the look I described earlier, compressed, tired, traveling without a clear destination. 3 of them I never saw leave. I also started checking the rooms after they turned over, not immediately. I'd wait for Rosa to clean them, then I'd go in on a maintenance pretext and look. Room 34 after a guest I never saw, normal, clean, nothing left behind. Room 39 after a guest I'd seen check in. A woman, maybe 30, dark hair, carrying a backpack. She'd stayed 2 nights. After she left, I went in. Under the bed, pushed against the wall, I found a hair tie. Brown. Simple elastic. I picked it up and put it in my notebook. Room 36, Jolene Devereaux's room. I went in on a slow Tuesday when no one was staying in the West Wing. I checked every surface, every drawer, behind every piece of furniture, under the lip of the bathroom counter. Someone had scratched something into the laminate with a fingernail or a key. Small. Hard to see unless you were looking. It said "No ride." 2 words. Scratched into the surface of a bathroom counter in a soundproofed room in a budget highway motel in the middle of nowhere. I photographed it with my phone. I sat on the bathroom floor. And I understood fully what this place was. I need to talk about Carrow. Because the instinct, when you hear a story like this, is to imagine a monster. Someone with dead eyes and a cruel mouth who radiates malice. That's how it works in stories. The villain is visible. The evil is readable. Carrow was not that. Carrow was a competent manager who kept his property clean, paid his employees on time, treated his wife with visible affection, and knew the name of every regular guest. He remembered details, which rooms people preferred, whether they took cream in their coffee, what they'd said about their kids the last time they'd stayed. He was good at his job, both jobs. And that's the thing that kept me up at night. Not the West Wing, not the soundproofing, not the scratched message under the counter. What kept me up was the realization that you can't operate something like this for 11 years, and probably longer, because what was the Coronado before the Carrows? Without being organized, patient, and fundamentally ordinary in your daily presentation. The banality of it. I keep coming back to that word, the sheer operational banality. A guest checks in, she's alone. She has no car, or her car is temporarily unavailable. She's offered a ride in the morning. She accepts because it's a reasonable offer from a reasonable person in a reasonable place. She goes to her soundproofed room. She goes to sleep. And in the morning, I don't know. I don't know what happens in the morning. I don't know if Carrow does the driving or if someone else does. I don't know if the destination is the bus station or somewhere else. I don't know how many people have accepted that ride over how many years. I don't know where they are. But I know that room 36 has a message scratched into the counter that says "No ride," and I know the woman who was supposed to be in that room told her sister someone had offered to drive her, and I know she was never heard from again. 8 weeks in, a Saturday, I was replacing a section of vinyl flooring in the breakfast room when Bethany came through on her way to start her shift. "Hey, Owen. How are you doing?" "Good. You." She sat down at one of the tables. Bethany was maybe 40. She wore her hair pulled back tight, and she had a way of looking at you that was either very perceptive or very nervous, and I'd never figured out which. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Sure. Have you been going into the West Wing at night?" I stopped working. "Once. Pipe repair. Carrow asked me about it. He wanted to know if I'd seen you over there after hours. What did you tell him? I told him I hadn't. Because I hadn't. But Owen, he was specific. He asked about the exact night. He knew the date. How would he know that? She looked at the table. There are cameras. Where? West Wing hallway. Both ends. They're not on the system you can see from the front desk. He's got a separate feed in the office. I thought about this. Are there cameras in the rooms? I don't know. I've never asked and I'm not going to. Bethany, how long have you worked here? 3 years. And in 3 years, don't. She said it quietly, but immediately. I know what you're going to ask, and I am asking you, as someone who has been here longer than you and who has to keep being here after you leave. Don't ask me that. She got up and went to the front desk. I sat on the floor with a utility knife in my hand and a strip of vinyl flooring, and I thought, she said after you leave. Not if. After. I want to talk about what it's like to know something terrible and be unable to prove it in a way that anyone will act on, because that's where I lived for the next 3 weeks. In the gap between knowledge and evidence, I knew the way you know your own name. The Coronado Motor Lodge was a machine for making vulnerable people disappear, and it had been operating in plain sight for years, possibly decades, in a county where the sheriff's office had been called about it before and concluded there was nothing to find. But what did I have? A letter to the editor, a scratched message, a notebook full of my own observations that any defense attorney could characterize as the paranoid log of a recently separated veteran living alone in a motel room. I could go to the FBI. That was the logical escalation. Rural law enforcement isn't responding. Go federal. But go federal with what? I had no names of victims besides Jolene Devereaux, and her disappearance was 9 years old and had already been officially classified as voluntary. I had no physical evidence that would survive a search warrant application. I had a feeling and a pattern and a hair tie in a notebook. I called Sandra Devereaux again. I told her what I'd found. The scratched message, the soundproofing, the cameras, the pattern. She cried. Not loudly. The kind of crying that sounds like it's been happening for years in small, private installments. What do we do? She asked. I don't know yet. Can you get into the office? The separate camera system. If there's footage, if I break into his office and steal footage, it's inadmissible and I'm the one who goes to jail. Then what can you do? I didn't have an answer. Week 10. Something changed. A woman checked into room 35 on a Wednesday evening. I saw her. She was maybe 25. Thin. She had a rolling suitcase and a canvas tote bag with a library logo on it. Some county system in New Mexico. I couldn't read the full name. She walked from a sedan that I later realized wasn't hers. Someone had dropped her off. The sedan left immediately. Bethany checked her in. I was in the lobby, fixing a wall-mounted brochure rack. I heard the whole exchange. 1 night, maybe 2. I'm not sure yet. How will you be checking out? Do you need transportation? That question, that exact question, asked in that exact, pleasant, helpful tone. I'd heard Bethany ask it of West Wing guests before and never thought twice about it. Now it sounded like a trap being set with a smile. I might need a ride to the bus station, the woman said. Is that possible? Absolutely. We can arrange that. Mr. Carrow usually handles transportation for our guests. The woman smiled. Grateful. Relieved. One less thing to worry about. I watched her walk down the hall toward the West Wing with her suitcase rolling behind her, and I made a decision. I waited until 9 p.m. Then I walked to room 35 and knocked. The woman opened the door partway. She was wearing a sweatshirt and socks. She'd been lying on the bed. I could see the impression. Hey, sorry to bother you. I'm Owen. Maintenance. I just wanted to make sure everything's working in here. Faucets, heat, all that. Oh, yeah, everything's fine. Good. Listen, I lowered my voice. If you need a ride to the bus station, I call a cab. Don't take the ride they offer. She stared at me. I know that sounds strange. I'm not trying to scare you. Just call a cab. Or I can call you one tomorrow. But don't get in a car with anyone from this hotel. Why? And here's where I failed her. Because what do you say? I can't prove it. I can't show her documents or evidence or a police report. I'm a maintenance guy standing in her doorway telling her not to trust the nice people at the front desk. And I look exactly like the kind of person a woman traveling alone should be more afraid of, not less. I've seen some things that concern me, I said. I can't get into all of it. Please call a cab. She looked at me for a long moment. Then she said, okay, and closed the door. I walked back to my room, and I didn't sleep. In the morning, I positioned myself in the lobby at 6:30. when the breakfast room opened. I wanted to see her come through. I wanted to know she was still there. At 7:15, I saw Carrow walk down the West Wing hallway carrying a set of car keys. At 7:20, I heard a car start in the lot. I went to the window. Carrow's personal truck, a silver Chevy, was pulling out of the lot with someone in the passenger seat. I couldn't see clearly. The angle was wrong and the morning light was in my eyes, but the passenger was small, thin. I ran to my truck. I started it and pulled out of the lot. I could see Carrow's Chevy on 162, heading west toward Durango. I followed at a distance. He drove to the Greyhound station. He pulled up to the drop-off area. The passenger got out. It was her, the woman from room 35. She had her suitcase in her library tote. She waved at him. He waved back. She walked into the station. He pulled away. I sat in the parking lot and watched her buy a ticket through the window. She sat down in the waiting area. She was fine. She was alive. She was catching a bus. I drove back to the Coronado feeling insane. But here's what I need you to understand. That woman being fine doesn't mean anything. A predatory system doesn't take everyone. It can't. If every person who checked into the West Wing disappeared, the pattern would be obvious. The sheriff would have a stack of reports. The hotel would have been investigated and shut down years ago. The system works precisely because most people pass through safely. Most people get their ride to the bus station and wave goodbye and arrive at their destination and never think about the Coronado again. The hotel functions. It has reviews online, 3.5 stars, clean for the price, nice staff, convenient to ski area, real reviews from real guests who stayed and left and were fine. The system takes one, occasionally, selectively. Someone whose absence won't generate momentum. Someone without family checking in every day. Someone whose disappearance will be classified as voluntary because there's nothing to suggest otherwise. This is what makes it invisible, not secrecy. Statistics. The overwhelming majority of evidence says the hotel is normal, and the tiny minority of evidence that says otherwise can be dismissed as coincidence, error, or the paranoid observations of a single employee. Week 11. I made a decision. I couldn't go to the sheriff. I'd tried. I couldn't go to the FBI with what I had. I couldn't get into Carrow's office without committing a crime. I couldn't keep standing in people's doorways giving warnings that made me look like the threat. What I could do was create a record that someone else could use. I bought a cheap laptop in Durango. Paid cash. I set up an email account. And over 3 nights, I wrote everything down. Every observation. Every date. Every room number. Sandra Devereaux's name and phone number with her permission, the photo of the scratch message, my notes about the soundproofing, Bethany's confirmation of the separate camera system, Dale's comments about the walls, the man in the lobby who warned me about the driving. Every detail I had, organized chronologically and as clearly as I could manage. I sent it to 3 places. A journalist at the Durango Herald whose byline I'd seen on investigative pieces, a tip line at the Colorado Bureau of Investigation, and Sandra Devereaux, so she'd have it regardless of what happened to me. Then I started packing. Dale found me the morning I was loading my truck. He was standing by the pool, same as always. But instead of sitting in his chair, he was standing at the edge of the empty basin, looking down into it. "You're leaving?" "Yeah, because of the West Wing." I stopped, looked at him. "How much do you know?" He didn't look at me. He kept looking into the empty pool. It was maybe 5 feet deep at the deep end. Cracked plaster. Leaves collected in the drain. "I've been here since 1998, he said. "Before the Carrows, before the renovation. When this was the original owner's place. What happened under the original owners?" "Same thing. Different rooms." I set down the box I was carrying. "Dale, the rooms were on the north wing then. He had 4 of them set up. He did the driving himself. He was less careful. There were complaints. He sold the place in 2004 to avoid an investigation that never came. And the Carrows bought it? The Carrows bought it knowing what it was. How do you know that?" He finally looked at me. His face was the same as always, weathered, lined, expressionless in a way that had nothing to do with calm. "Because I'm the one who told them." I stared at him. "You told them. The original owner was my brother-in-law. When he decided to sell, he told me to stay on, keep the grounds, make sure the next people understood the property. Understood the Dale. Understood what? That the hotel is used to make people disappear?" He winced. Not at the accusation, at the word. "Nobody makes anyone disappear. People come. Some people leave. Some people don't. The ones who don't, they weren't going to arrive anywhere anyway. They were already gone before they checked in. No family calling every day. No job waiting. No one to notice. Jolene Devereaux had a sister. He went quiet. Her sister has been looking for her for 9 years, Dale. She hired a private investigator. She wrote a letter to the newspaper. She calls the sheriff once a year. She hasn't stopped. He looked back at the pool. I didn't know that name, he said. How many names don't you know? He didn't answer. I want to tell you what I did next, but first I want to tell you what I didn't do. I didn't confront Carrow. I didn't go to Nadine. I didn't call the police from the parking lot and make a dramatic stand. Because Dale had just told me, in plain language, that this operation had been running since at least 1998, 26 years, under 2 different owners, with a groundskeeper serving as the institutional memory and transition manager. He told me the county had been close to investigating once and the owner had simply sold the property and walked away. He told me the Carrows had been briefed before they bought the place, and the sheriff's office had already been called about it, by Sandra Devereaux, by the private investigator she'd hired, probably by others I didn't know about, and nothing had happened. So what I understood, standing in that parking lot with a box of my belongings and a 70-year-old groundskeeper staring into an empty pool, was that this was not a secret. This was a consensus. The kind of quiet, structural consensus that small, isolated communities arrive at without ever holding a vote. The hotel brings money. The hotel employs people. The victims are invisible by design. No local connections. No one showing up to ask questions. Or if someone does show up, the answer is already prepared, and the records are already clean. Dale was not a villain. Dale was a caretaker. He maintained the grounds and he maintained the understanding, and he'd been doing both so long that the distinction between the two had disappeared. I loaded the last box into my truck. You sent the emails, Dale said. I looked at him. Carrow checks the Wi-Fi logs. He saw the traffic last night. He doesn't know what you sent, but he knows you sent something. Good. He's going to scrub the West Wing today. The cameras, the records, all of it. By tonight, it'll just be a motel. And then it'll stay a motel for a while. A year, maybe 2, until it feels safe again. And then it starts back up. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. I drove to Grand Junction. I checked into a Motel 6, and yes, the irony of that was not lost on me. I sat on the bed and waited. The journalist from the Herald emailed me 3 days later. She'd looked into the property records, and the soundproofing was verifiable through a building permit filed in 2015. She'd contacted the sheriff's office for comment, and been told there were no open investigations involving the Coronado. She called Sandra Devereaux, who confirmed everything I'd described. She said she was interested, but needed more. She needed a victim besides Jolene. She needed physical evidence. She needed someone willing to go on record. I told her I'd go on record. She said that helped, but wasn't enough. A single former employee making accusations against his employer with no corroborating physical evidence was a lawsuit waiting to happen. The paper's legal team wouldn't clear it. The CBI never responded. Sandra called me. She said the journalist had called her, and she was hopeful for the first time in years, and was there anything else I could do? I said I didn't know. That was 5 months ago. I'm back in Grand Junction, working handyman jobs. I check the Coronado's website once a week. It's still operating. Reviews are still coming in. 3.5 stars. Clean for the price. Nice owner. Very helpful. Dale was right. They scrubbed it. The Coronado, right now, today, is just a motel. The West Wing is just a wing. The soundproofed rooms are just quiet rooms. There is nothing to find because the evidence only exists in my notebook, my emails, and a scratched message under a bathroom counter that could mean anything or nothing. But the job listing went up again 2 hours ago. Same position, same wording, same salary. Maintenance manager, Mountain Lodge, housing included. And I know what that means. It means the pause is over. It means Carrow has decided enough time has passed. It means the West Wing is about to start accepting guests again, and a new maintenance person's gonna move into room 18 and fix the dryers and eat Nadine's soup and slowly notice the same things I noticed. And maybe they'll find a list too. Not mine. I took mine with me. But maybe they'll find the next one, because whoever had the job before me felt the same compulsion I feel right now. The need to warn someone you'll never meet about a danger you can't prove. I called Sandra tonight. I told her about the listing. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "What if I apply?" What? What if I apply the job? I can do basic maintenance. I could get in there and... Sandra? No. She was my sister, Owen. And if you go there and something happens to you, Who looks for you? She didn't have an answer for that, because she's Jolene's sister, which means she's exactly the kind of person this system is built to process. Someone driven by grief into a situation where they're alone, far from home, and trusting the wrong people because the alternative is giving up. I told her to stay in Flagstaff. I told her I'd keep pushing the journalist. I told her I'd try the FBI directly this time. Not a tip line, an actual office. I don't know if any of it will work. Here's what I think about, lying in this motel room at 1 in the morning. I think about the fact that every system designed to catch something like this, law enforcement, journalism, public records, requires a specific kind of evidence that this operation is specifically designed not to produce. You need a victim, but the victims are selected for their invisibility. You need a witness, but the witnesses are employees whose credibility is undermined by their proximity. You need physical evidence, but the physical evidence is removed before anyone with authority arrives. The system doesn't beat the safeguards. It operates in the spaces between them. It lives in the gap between what you know and what you can prove, between the crime and the report, between the disappearance and the investigation that never opens because no one, with standing requests, won. And it relies above everything else on the fact that most people who pass through are fine, because every safe guest is a data point against every missing one. The hotel's average is protected. The statistical noise of ordinary operations rounds out the signal of extraordinary harm. I think about Jolene Devereaux scratching no ride into a bathroom counter. I think about how long that took. I think about the tools she used. A key, maybe, or a nail file. I think about her sitting in that soundproofed room, knowing something was wrong, not being able to call her sister because the cell service cuts out in that part of the valley, and deciding to leave the only message she could in the only medium available to her. Scratched into laminate. Hidden under a counter lip, waiting years for someone to crouch down in the right position and look. She knew, and she still couldn't get out. Or maybe she could have. Maybe if she walked to the highway and started walking east toward Durango 11 miles in the dark, she'd have made it. Maybe the danger was only in the car. Maybe the offer was the trap and the refusal was the escape, and she didn't refuse because why would you? A nice man at a clean hotel offers you a ride. You say yes. You're grateful. I think about all the things that would have to change for this to stop. The sheriff's office would have to take it seriously, which means someone with standing would have to file a report that couldn't be dismissed. The journalist would have to get her editor to clear the legal risk, which means corroborating evidence that doesn't exist in any accessible form. The FBI would have to prioritize a cold case in a rural county with no political profile, which means competing with every other demand on their resources. Or Carrow would have to make a mistake. A guest with a family that won't stop calling. A body that surfaces somewhere traceable. A record that didn't get scrubbed in time. 26 years. If Dale is right, this has been running for 26 years, and none of those things have happened. The listing is still live. I checked again 10 minutes ago. It's been viewed over 200 times. Somewhere, right now, someone in a situation like the one I was in 5 months ago, separated, broke, tired, looking for a room and a paycheck, is reading the words, housing included, and feeling that same gravitational pull. And they're going to apply, and they're going to get the job, because the job is always available, because no one stays. And they're going to move into room 18, and find the waffle iron, and fix the dryer, and meet Nadine, and eat her soup. And eventually, they're going to notice the West Wing, and they're going to have to make the same choice I made, with the same useless tools, against the same invisible machine. I don't know how to stop it. I've been honest with you about that. I don't have a solution. I don't have a plan that ends with sirens and handcuffs and Carrow in the back of a cruiser. I have a notebook, a phone number in Flagstaff, a journalist who needs more, and a scratched message under a counter in room 36 that may have already been sended off. What I have is this recording. I know it's not enough. It's the same kind of evidence I've been describing, the kind that sounds devastating in sequence and sounds like nothing in isolation. A former employee with a story, that's all this is. But here's what I keep coming back to. The list I found. The rules. They were written by someone who figured it out before me. And before that person, there was someone else. And before them, someone else. Going back years. Decades. A chain of maintenance workers and desk clerks and groundskeepers who each, independently, recognized what the Coronado was and couldn't do anything about it. Every single one of them left. Every single one of them took what they knew and drove away and folded it into the private architecture of their own guilt and moved on. I'm not different from them. I left too. I'm in a motel room in Grand Junction talking to my phone. But I'm not folding it up. I'm not putting it behind a nightstand. I'm saying it out loud, with names and dates and room numbers, and I'm putting it where anyone with a search engine and the Coronado's address can find it. Not because I think this recording will shut the place down. I don't. Because the next person who gets hired there deserves to hear this before they fix their first dryer. They deserve to know what the West Wing is for. They deserve to know about the rides. They deserve to know about the soundproofing and the cameras and the scrub records, and Dale standing by the empty pool like a man who's been keeping the grounds of a graveyard so long he's forgotten it isn't a garden. And they deserve to know that the rules aren't a prank. Don't take shifts at the front desk. Don't go into the West Wing after 10. Don't help a guest carry something to their car. Don't talk to Dale about the rooms. Don't get in a car with a guest. Check the connecting door in rooms 6 and 7. Don't investigate noises in vacant rooms alone. And for the love of God, if they offer someone a ride, say something. Say anything. Be the crazy maintenance guy in the doorway, because the alternative is being the quiet maintenance guy who fixed the dryer and ate the soup and noticed the soundproofing and the missing names and the empty suitcases and did nothing. I was almost that guy. I think about room 36. I think about Jolene on her knees in the bathroom, scratching letters into the counter. NORIDE, the smallest possible message. The loudest thing she could do in a room designed so no one would ever hear her. I hear her. The listing's still up. 214 views. If you're one of them, if you're reading that listing right now and the words housing included are pulling at you the way they pulled at me, I need you to hear this. The soup is good. The work is honest. The view from the East Wing is beautiful in the afternoon. Don't take the job. And if you already have, check under the counter in room 36. Run your fingers along the underside of the laminate, near the wall, down low. If the letters are still there, you have time. If they've been sanded off, Carrow knows someone found them, and he's already watching to see what you do next.